Hey everybody, welcome back to Beatles News Roundup here on Vinyl Rewind. This is the ongoing series where we recap the latest Beatles news stories from the past month. Today's episode covers February 2025 and it is jam-packed with news to cover, so let's not waste any more time and jump right into the biggest story. The Beatles won their first Grammy since 1997. It was for Best Rock Performance for their song Now and Then. The award also marks the first time a song made with the assistance of AI won a Grammy. At least that we know of. Neither Paul, Ringo, nor producer Giles Martin were in attendance, so Sean Ono Lennon accepted the award on the Beatles' behalf during the pre-show event where some of the awards are handed out before the main ceremony that's televised. So you don't see this on TV. But, you know, they give out a ton of awards, some of them technical, and this was one of them. And I gotta say, Sean gave a pretty decent speech considering he didn't know he was gonna go up there until moments before. The next day, Ringo took to Instagram to share his reaction of winning. He wrote, "Wow, another Grammy. Well done, everybody. I send you peace and love." That's right, the beat goes on. Thanks, peace and love, Ringo. It's worth mentioning that neither John nor George's family will be receiving a statue, and that's because Grammy rules essentially state that they've been dead for too long. Basically, to be eligible for a physical reward, you have to have contributed to the recording within the last 5 years of it being released. A precedent for this was set in the early 90s when Natalie Cole won an award for her posthumous duet she had with her late father, Nat King Cole, who did not win an award. I mean, it makes a lot of sense when you think about it, but anyway, the Beatles were also nominated for Record of the Year, but they lost that award to Kendrick Lamar, who won for his song Not Like Us. And speaking of Now and Then, the Music Radar Tech YouTube channel just released a new video with Giles Martin explaining how AI was used in the creation of the single. I recommend checking it out if you haven't already. He really helps to demystify the technology and explains it in really simple terms. In movie news, the first teaser trailer for the new Fantastic Four movie came out, and there's a not so subtle nod to the Beatles at the very end. Now look, I'm no comic book nerd, I don't follow Marvel, but even I can see clearly that this is in reference to the Beatles' performance on the Ed Sullivan Show. Now, those who know better than me are quick to point out that there was a quip made by Doctor Strange in the 2022 film where he says to Mr. Fantastic,
"Didn't you guys chart in the 60s?
Now, since this new Fantastic Four film takes place in an alternate 1960s universe, there's speculation that the Fantastic Four could be that universe's version of the Fab Four of our universe. Only time will tell for sure, but I, for one, would love to see Thing banging on some drums. Hopefully they do it, but yeah, let me know what you think. In George Harrison news, February 25th would have been his 82nd birthday, and SiriusXM celebrated by having a week of special programming on the Beatles channel, including guest DJ sets hosted by Beck, Billy Idol, Steve Perry, Mike Campbell, and Slim Jim Phantom. They also had a Living in the Material World roundtable featuring Klaus Vormann, Jim Keltner, Mike Campbell, Jim James, and Paul Hicks. There was also a guitar-themed roundtable with other notable guests, including Ben Harper, Nancy Wilson, and Warren Hayes. And finally, there was an episode of Dark Horse Radio with special guest Olivia Harrison. Now, I don't have SiriusXM, but this all sounds really cool. If you ended up catching any of this special programming, let me know what you think. In George Harrison auction news, a piece of his toast sold for thousands of dollars. I swear, I'm not making this up. The story goes in 1963, a 15-year-old Beatles fan named Sue Houghton was friends with George's family, and on a morning visit to the family home, she took some of George's crust from some toast that he didn't finish. She kept it with other mementos such as threads from his jeans, fluff from under his bed, and all of this was in a scrapbook for many, many years. Then in 1991, she sold the book at auction for around 1,300 pounds. George thought this was pretty ridiculous. In a 1992 interview for Vox magazine, he said, "Well, I never authenticated it. That's totally BS. I ate all my toast. I never left any. The madness is the people selling it and the people actually buying it. It's Monty Python time." Years later, the scrapbook was broken up and the page with the toast on it was recently sold in a private sale for an undisclosed amount. The buyer was Beatles and music memorabilia collector Joseph O'Donnell. He had it framed in museum-grade UV protective glass, and he told Far Out magazine that To me, the toast perfectly sums up Beatlemania and the absolute manic obsession with the boys in the 1960s. It shows the lengths people will go to be close to fame and their idols, so to me, it's priceless, even if it's very, very weird. Despite owning vinyl rarities, autographs, and all the rest, this is by far the most exciting piece in my collection. In Paul McCartney news, on February 11th, he made a surprise announcement of 3 shows at the very small New York City venue called the Bowery. Tickets were only $50 each and sold out within minutes of being announced. Each night, Paul delighted the crowd of 575 fans with a selection of songs from the Beatles catalog, as well as his own solo career and tracks from his time with Wings. He then capped off the week with a performance on the 50th anniversary special of Saturday Night Live. You can check out that performance here on YouTube. Late last month, Paul announced a new book he co-wrote titled Wings, the Story of a Band on the Run. The 528-page book will tell the history of the band from their formation in the early 70s all the way through to their disbandment in 1981. The book was put together from Paul's own memory, plus many hours of interviews with former band members, family, and other key people relevant to the story of Wings. The book will also feature over 100 black and white and color photographs, with some of them being previously unseen by the public. The book is set to be released on November 4th of this year, and it's available for pre-order now as either an ebook or a physical hardcover. In other Paul news, he's going to be selling a set of his recently discovered photographs he took during the Beatles' rise to fame between December of 1963 and February 1964. Now, many of you may remember back in 2020, Paul found them in his personal archive. An exhibition was then created and they were first displayed to the public at the National Portrait Gallery in London back in the summer of 2023. It then moved to various US cities as well as Japan, and this April 25th, a selection of 36 images from this collection will go on display at the Gagosian Gallery in Beverly Hills. I do want to point out that the upcoming showing will not be the same as the museum exhibition, but will feature many of the same images plus additional photos not shown in that exhibit. Each print comes signed by Paul, and prices will range between $12,000 and the high 5 figures. A portion of each sale will be donated to support ongoing recovery and rebuilding efforts in Southern California following the recent wildfires. The showing runs from the end of April through June 21st with an opening reception on April 25th from 6 to 8 p.m. The reception is free and open to the public, so please come on down if you can. No appointment is needed to visit the gallery, and it's open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. If you can't make it out to the gallery, but you still want to enjoy the photos, check out the hardcover book of all the photos titled 1964 Eyes of the Storm. In Ringo's star news, on the 21st of last month, he took to the stage at the Grand Ole Opry for the first time in his career. He performed 3 songs, Time on My Hands from his latest album, plus Act Naturally, and ending his set with A Little Help from My Friends, and he sure had a lot of guest stars on stage. Check it out. You can find clips of this performance recorded by fans in the audience, but so far the Grand Ole Opry has yet to upload any official footage from the show. Hopefully they'll fix this sooner rather than later. Also, this September, Ringo and his all-star band will perform at the Bourbon and Beyond Festival in Louisville, Kentucky. The 4-day festival is a celebration of bourbon, food, and music, all things that I love. I gotta go to this. If you end up going, you might as well head south down to Nashville and go to the Musicians Hall of Fame and Museum to check out the new Ringo Starr exhibit that opened on February 20th. It's called Ringo Starr Beats and Threads and features drumsticks, personal documents, clothing, other things, but the centerpiece is the drum kit he played at Shea Stadium back in 1965. The exhibit will be on display for a year, so you got plenty of time to plan your visit. In other Ringo news, his 2-night performance at the Ryman from this past January will air as a 2-hour special on March 10th. You can watch it on CBS or on Paramount+. In John Lennon news, the Ultimate Collection box set for his Mind Games album won a Grammy for Best Boxed or Special Limited Edition Packaging. And if I'm honest, it really deserved to win. I mean, that thing just looks incredible. The award was given to the art directors Sean Ono Lennon and Simon Hinton. Martin. In other John news, there is a new vinyl release coming out on Record Store Day this April. The 4-track EP will feature songs from the 1972 one-to-one concert. 3 of them are previously unreleased, and the 4th is a new remix of Instant Karma. This concert is notable for the fact that it was his only full-length and really his final concert after he left the Beatles. The EP is limited to 3,000 copies in the US and 5,500 for the rest of the world. It comes on 180-gram yellow vinyl. And speaking of that one-to-one concert series, you remember that documentary film I talked about last year? It's the one that centers on those concerts, but it also goes into John or Yoko's personal life, living in New York City in the 1970s. Well, anyway, it features a ton of newly restored and remastered footage from those concerts, as well as previously unseen video and unheard audio from the John Lennon archives. Well, I mention all of this because it's just got a European distribution deal. Now, no word yet on when it will be released, but here in America, Magnolia Pictures plans on releasing it exclusively in IMAX theaters starting on April 11th, and then it will be made available on HBO and the streaming platform Max at a later date. And speaking of John Lennon documentaries, there is yet another one coming out, and this one is called Borrowed Time: Lennon's Last Decade, and as the title suggests, this one focuses on the last decade of his life and pulls from archival interviews, video footage, images, and new footage of musicians and other historians talking about John's life. Now, one thing that really intrigues me about it is that it teases this idea that John had for a comeback world tour concert that sadly never came to be. Now, no word yet on when this will come out, but you can check out the first trailer here on YouTube. In John auction news, a copy of his 1964 book in his own right sold for £2,000. This was signed by both John and his first wife, Cynthia. Honestly, for that price, it seems pretty reasonable. I would have thought it would have gone for a lot more. I mean, what do you think? Would you have paid that much for this book? Let me know. In Beatles merch news, Uncut Magazine has published a Beatles edition of their Ultimate Record Collection series. The publication covers the years 1960 through 1964 and provides insightful essays on the Beatles' singles, EPs, and albums, both the UK and American releases. The writers also pulled from Uncut's archives to provide relevant historical details. Volume 2 is available for pre-order now and will be released sometime this March. Julian's Auctions, who helped put on Ringo's exhibit in Nashville that I talked about earlier, has several Ringo books for sale. Beats and Threads is the companion book to the exhibit and features over 300 images of his clothing and style, as well as his various drum kits. Also available is a book on Ringo's life and times with the Beatles called Lifted. The signed edition runs $600, but the regular edition is only $75. All proceeds from both books go to the Lotus Foundation, which promotes charitable projects that serve to advance social welfare in diverse areas. And now you can own a replica of John Lennon's guitar that recently sold for almost $3 million at auction. Framus Guitars is reissuing the famous 12-string hootenanny guitar that John used to write You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. While the guitar maker was unable to view John's original, they did have access to an identical vintage hootenanny from their archives, and these new guitars were made to the exact specifications of the original with the blessings of the Lennon estate. The guitars are available as either 12 or 6-string models and come in a choice of 2 finishes. The guitars start at €1,000 and all of them come in special hootenanny hard cases. Honestly, for that price, it seems really reasonable, but I haven't shopped for a guitar in a while, so I don't know. You let me know. And finally, this past month in Beatles history, 60 years ago, the Beatles arrived in the Bahamas to begin shooting their second feature film, Help. The movie premiered in London on the 29th of July, 1965 and went on to gross $12.1 million at the box office. And while at the time it was not as well received as A Hard Day's Night, I still think it's a fun watch and recommend checking it out if you haven't already. All right, everybody, that will do it for today. Thank you so very much for watching, but I especially want to thank all my members over on Patreon. I'm your Vinyl Geek, and I'll catch you on the flip side.